It was a cold winter morning when I first realized that something was terribly wrong. The school corridors were unusually silent, and an eerie chill filled the air. I had arrived early, hoping to squeeze in some last-minute revision before my final math exam. Little did I know this day would be etched in my memory as the most terrifying experience of my school life. The day before, I had stayed up late trying to memorize complex equations and formulas. Sleep-deprived and anxious, I made my way to the classroom. As I entered, I noticed that most of my classmates were already seated, their faces pale with tension. Our teacher, Mr. Arora, stood at the front of the room with an expressionless face. There was something odd about him. His eyes appeared sunken and his movements were rigid, almost mechanical. "Good morning, class," he said in a monotone voice. "Today's exam will be special." A cold shiver ran down my spine at those words. No one dared to speak. We took our seats, and the exam papers were distributed. As I glanced at the questions, my heart sank. They weren't anything like what we had studied. Instead, the questions seemed bizarre, almost nonsensical. If a shadow grows twice as long at midnight, what is the time in the mirror world? Read one question. Another asked, how many echoes does a silent scream produce? I looked around to see if anyone else was as baffled as I was, but my classmates were writing furiously as if under some kind of spell. Sweat trickled down my forehead. I tried to focus, but the room began to feel darker and colder with every passing minute. The windows fogged up, and the walls seemed to close in. Suddenly, I heard a faint whisper. It seemed to come from the paper itself. Leaning closer, I realized it wasn't my imagination. The questions were speaking, whispering cryptic clues and riddles in a voice so low it was almost inaudible. My hands trembled as I tried to write something down, anything that made sense. Halfway through the exam, I noticed something else. The clock on the wall wasn't moving. Its hands were stuck at exactly 9:15. Panic set in. I nudged my friend sitting next to me, but he didn't respond. He kept writing, his eyes wide open and unblinking. It was as if he had become a puppet controlled by an unseen force. What is happening? I thought to myself. The whispers grew louder, and soon the words on the paper started rearranging themselves. I couldn't take it anymore. I stood up only to find that my legs felt heavy, as though weighed down by invisible chains. "Sit down," Mr. Arora's voice echoed through the room, but it didn't sound like him anymore. His voice had become distorted, almost demonic. I sank back into my seat, too frightened to move. Time seemed to stretch endlessly. Each second felt like an eternity. Finally, after what felt like hours, Mr. Arora announced, "Pens down." But something strange happened. No one stopped writing. They continued scribbling furiously, as if in a trance. "Pens down," he repeated, this time louder and more menacing. One by one, my classmates stopped, their faces blank and devoid of any emotion. I put down my pen, my heart pounding in my chest. "You may leave," he said. I grabbed my things and hurried out of the classroom, my legs shaking uncontrollably. As I stepped out into the corridor, everything felt normal again. The sunlight streamed through the windows, and I could hear the chatter of students from other classes. But when I turned around, I saw that the door to our classroom had vanished. In its place was a solid wall, as if the room had never existed. To this day, I don't know what really happened during that exam. None of my classmates ever mentioned it again, and when I asked them about it, they looked at me as if I was crazy. But I know what I experienced, and every time I pass that part of the school, I feel a strange chill, as if unseen eyes are watching me. Maybe it was just a bad dream, or maybe some exams are meant to be more than just a test of knowledge.